appreciate everyone coming out. My name is Robert Mallory. I teach the Blockchain Technology Management Certificate program here on campus. Go FinTech. I'm an MLS student like most of you, and during the day I do have a technology venture fund. Most of the questions that I get from the people that comprise the investors, being athletes and actors, is what's new in the space of sports law? What's happening on campus that is investable or that is fast moving? And I tell them, well, that would be NIL. I am not an expert, but I know people that are. And I decided to invite them here today. And the people that are wanting to get a handle on this space could be well served by watching the about half an hour long video of what we'll be discussing today. So I thought that we would introduce the panel, Chase, all the way over, and we could just jump into some questions on how things have evolved, what's happened since all this has kicked off 2 years ago. And Chase, want to lead us off?
Definitely. I just want to thank y'all for being here. It's good to see all my classmates. Shout out MLS. Here. I'm currently a fifth year here at UCLA. I play football here. I'm doing a master's in legal studies. Focuses on general studies. I really wanted to do the MLS program because I'm self-repped in my talent and marketing career. And I think it's also sort of a trend to be self-repped in the athletic career in general. I think Lamar Jackson showed that with the right expertise and right passion about what you're doing, that law is a lot more accessible, contract law is a lot more accessible than people make it. And I've sort of learned that more throughout this program. But I look forward to discussing the topic of NIL. I think NIL and the impending rev share models that are here in the college athlete space are shaking things up. And I think they'll legitimize the way the NCAA operates.
Hi everybody, my name is Michelle Edgar. I was in the first program here at MLS, so it's so good to be back. I did my capstone on name, image, likeness. Actually, I chased down Chase when he was one of the first athletes here at UCLA, brokering a lot of deals. One of the first deals, I think it was P&G or something, right? Was it P&G? Unilever. So I am currently heading up partnerships for the Compton Unified School District. I also am teaching a Northwestern Law NIL class, which has been super rewarding because if it wasn't for my capstone project, I wouldn't be doing this. So I'm passionate about this. I was in artist representation before in the music industry, so putting together deals and now putting deals together to help change the educational system. And also I'm one of the commissioners in Santa Monica, so across city landscape, that's what I'm passionate about.
Hey everyone, my name is Zach Oliver. I'm a co-founder and CFO at Matchpoint. We're a NIL marketplace platform, and we also help facilitate payments. A little bit about my background. I went to school also at Northwestern. I played football there from 11 to 16. I got my master's at Kellogg, and then went to work in the financial world for about 6 years, and then pivoted out and wanted to get back into the way of sports. So I was also on the Northwestern football team that attempted unionization back in like 2013 or 2014. So have been in the middle of all of this NIL stuff from before those three letters were ever combined. So it's been a fun ride, and there's a lot to discuss today.
Hi everybody, my name is Tina Jenge, and I'm the co-founder and COO of Alpha Trend. We are a technology platform that helps organizations create new revenue streams, and we've been serving the sports industry through the collectives, through the NIL collective. So our technology leverages blockchain and AI to make transactions more efficient and more engaging. So we've done digital collectible programs for various universities and helped athletes raise money through micro donations. I'm happy to be here.
So I thought before we started things, we would set the stage a little bit. So all this NIL legislation is very new. It started with California's Fair Pay to Play Act, which passed in September of 2019 and was adopted by the NCAA in 2021, allowing athletes to earn from essentially their name, image, and likeness. And that started in earnest July 1st of 2021. And it's grown quite a bit. So an individual football team, such as the one that Nick Saban leads at Alabama, is pulling $3 million a year for the athletes to distribute in various ways. Its percentages fall into place essentially around visibility. So the quarterback's going to get the lion's share of that, but it's going to do very well for the rest of the team. And Open Doors, which Chase was named the Male Athlete of the Year for in the inaugural year, says that $917 million will be going into NIL in some form, whether to the teams, to the university, from the collectives, from the corporations, and it's continuing to grow at more than 20%. So this is a very rapidly evolving space. 75% of athletes at these top universities that are Tier 1 got some sort of deal from a brand, 15% from a donor, and 4% from some type of fan that wants to get back to their alma mater and keep the best talent coming to their alma mater to keep dominating. And it's hitting not only the top schools, but BYU has gotten over $2 million in deals. And while the majority goes to football, almost exactly 50%, 17 goes to men's basketball, 15 to women's basketball. A number of sports that traditionally didn't get the resources are getting enormous amounts of resources, like women's gymnastics. So there's sensitivities and ways that NIL, without any restrictions, benefits a much broader swath of people that you might think. And that's one of the reasons why Chase went to Capitol Hill to defend exactly that. So one of the interesting things that Zach was referencing and that Chase knows well is a lot of the NIL movement started here on campus. So Ed O'Bannon, I believe it is, Chase, in 1995, he led Bruins to a national NCAA basketball championship. And he got into some legislation that Chase could speak to a little bit more thoroughly that really set the precedent that we're benefiting from today.
So it's actually an issue that's very pertinent today with the now re-release of the NCAA football games with EA Sports. O'Bannon had noticed that his likeness was being used without any proper compensation in the NCAA basketball game, video game, and he had sued. So there was a case called O'Bannon versus NCAA, and in 2014, the court sided with O'Bannon, and because of that, the game was discontinued. And O'Bannon truly made a sacrifice in this because he received a lot of flack. This was a beloved game. It ended both on the basketball side and football side, the NCAA games that they did with EA Sports. But what really happened, this set a precedent and a trend in the legal system of courts siding once again on the athlete side. I think anytime I try to refer to college athletes, I use the term college athlete instead of student athlete, because student athlete is a legal term that was created by the NCAA to get out of paying workman's comp in a wrongful death suit around 60 years ago, where a college football player died during a game and his widow had sued for workers' comp. So I think it's important to see how the legal system has played a large role in sort of taking away the rights of college athletes, making NIL sort of something novel when it's been available to every other student over the past 60 or 70 years, and why the legal system has been so integral in sort of reversing that damage over the past decade.
I'd be curious to know from Michelle on down to the right, what drew you to NIL and what continues to get you to be excited about being in the space?
Well, I think I was in law school, right? I was looking for something that was the most disruptive and changing literally while I was in law school. And I said, okay, this seems like a big, ever-changing mess. I said, I'm going to dive in here. So, I was in law school in 2020. So that summer, I decided I'm going to become an expert. I never did sports. It was more the music industry, but I love, doing talent brand deals. And I said, this speaks to everything that I know. And I'm really all about, making sure students are represented and can benefit off of their name, image, likeness. So it's a very interesting time. There's two things going on. There's, students as employees, and then there's a huge case that's going to be decided that Jeffrey Kessler, if you don't know who he is, he's the godfather, and I was fortunate enough to interview him for my capstone, and he's the reason NIL really changed, and he's going to be leading the House case early next year, and that's going to be an entire leading up to media rights and antitrust. So that's going to really change the game even more so. So it's been, exciting, and every day is a new sort of, evolution. Right now there's a big topic about all the IBs and what's happening with how that's going to change the landscape. So I think it's really fun because it speaks to a lot of different areas. You just have to find your lane or how you want to get involved, and it's fun to track the changes so quickly.
So, like I mentioned earlier, when I was at Northwestern in the middle of this NCAA EA Games issue, like I actually got a payout on that game, like the day that it discontinued. So we were, seeing all these rules change, and one of actually a starting quarterback at the time, his name's King Coulter, started this initiative around like unionization and like what that would mean. So basically decided to request employment status from the university, was actually granted that status. The university then appealed the issue, and then they won. But all of these conversations around, and from our standpoint, it wasn't really about like getting paid to play. It actually kind of goes back to like the health standpoint around like what is provided to the student athletes while they're still at school, after they graduate. There's a lot of people who still have lifelong issues with concussions and knee and joint pain that is just hasn't been taken care of. So we thought that we would put our best foot forward and try to really advocate for not only ourselves but for the future of kind of the space. Fast forward, graduated, worked in finance, and never really thought I was going to get back in the space, and then heard the rumors kind of coming back up that NIL was coming to fruition. Everything that we had kind of worked for and talked about back then, it was really happening. So I decided to kind of take some of the expertise I had in the financial world, and I was a trader, so kind of thinking about transactions like a clearinghouse model, and being able to leverage that into like a marketplace to protect the athletes, to make sure that they inevitably got paid from these brands who are ultimately going to need to make these transactions, and then protecting the brands to make sure that the athletes ultimately did fulfill their obligations from an NIL standpoint. So it's been a long journey, but a long one to go too.
For us at Alpha Trend, NIL space has been really unique to be in, and this is across industries, I believe. So it's about taking back control. For the longest time, student athletes were exploited for their work, and they were not getting compensated for it. And I think the last wave of regulations is really empowering student athletes to shape their NIL and get compensated for it. And it's not just anymore about the performance, but it's also how you build your brand. So with Alpha Trend, we build solutions. We have former athletes on our team, and we really thought about how can we build tools to support this initiative. How can we build tools for individuals to be able to leverage their fan base and build their name, and then carry that through for years to come.
I think one of the elements that you helped me really appreciate that I was not aware of before is the stat that Chase included in his congressional testimony, in that 80% of the NIL dollars that will go to students is from collectives, and you've double-clicked on collectives in a very meaningful way. So what have you seen from approaching collectives and trying to be helpful to collectives that has been colored your execution in this space?
Yeah, great question. So when we build our platform, we were trying to figure out who is the best customer for this. Is it the university, is it the student, or collectives? And in reality, student athletes are very tied up with just playing. They don't have a lot of time on their hands, and they need like a talent agent to manage the deals. So that's where collectives come into play. Yet collectives were struggling to find funds for the athletes. They're competing with universities on donor money, and they're leveraging their relationships for brands, but some brands are struggling to enter into a deal if they don't have the licensing rights. So we built this platform for collectives to be able to pull fans and students into this and allow micro donations in a fun and engaging way. So we built a model for collectives to launch one-time digital collectible programs. They involved student-athlete images, and then the collectives were able to shape how the athletes get compensated. they gave certain set of instructions to the athletes where athletes were able to just easily follow along, and then they were able to compensate based on how much involvement they put into the initiative.
And then Zach, I'd be curious to know from your experience as a player, how that colored the way that you put the platform together in addressing a student's needs while they're in college.
Certainly, yeah. We work a lot with collectives as well, and I mean, from their standpoint, I feel like communication and like centralization of deals and that communication all in one place was really like a big focal point of like when we were building out the platform to make it, this is a centralized place you can go to find deals from brands, find deals from collectives, find campaigns to apply to get free gear, and then kind of have it all be kind of integrated into one place. But on the collective side, these groups of donors who are putting their time and effort behind a lot of these initiatives are not being compensated. They're doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're most likely not getting a tax write-off anymore. So we basically help them on their side as well from like an operations standpoint, making sure that their donor dollars are coming in an effective way, and then redistributing and acting, being a intermediary between the collective and the athlete. And it actually allows us to be a little bit more of a trusted source on the athlete side, because we're not the person who's raising that money to redistribute to them. Like if there's ever an athlete, it's like, why am I not getting paid more? Like I deserve to be, getting X, Y, or Z. Well, it's like, well, we'll relay that message, but as of right now, this is what you're being compensated for, and like in the future, if you have any more questions, ask us. Versus going to the collective who's trying to fundraise and do everything else as well. So, lot to tap in there.
And I would just like to chime in because I asked Zach, what are the differences between Open Doors and your platform? And I think it's great, and you should share sort of how you can white label and utilize your platform.
Yeah, certainly. So, like I said, we built up this marketplace that has all of this complex front end and back end infrastructure. But another layer of what we decided to do when we launched this application last year was actually white label our entire platform, so that each university could have their own app in the App Store that they could call theirs, they could send their student athletes to, and from a marketing standpoint, it gives them something to put a little bit of a weight and time behind, so that they can market that to local brands. So the taco shop here or down the corner, like they could work with Jason in a very efficient way. They could find him very quickly. They could make an offer, and then they would be able to reach him in an efficient way. Versus there being this larger centralized marketplace, which obviously still exists. And is used every day, but it just goes back to branding and what's best for the schools, what's best for the athletes.
Now, there are a number of people that are going alone, trying to figure out which brand deals connect with them and what they're trying to build. There are others that are getting representation. Is there something that each of you would pass along to someone that's trying to figure out the NIL space to build their own brand that has been lost?
I think it's important to really understand what your brand is, and if you don't know what it is or what the story is that you want to tell, have experts. Whoever comes and approaches you, but also take the initiative. And Chase was brokering all his deals and was on the cutting edge, and it was interesting because I saw him brokering I was tracking all the brands, and then I'm like, wait, he did that one again, and then I started seeing how he was telling his story in the venture community and what he wanted to do around financial literacy. And then he brokered that you were part of the JP Morgan Chase. I was like, wow, this is interesting. It was like two worlds, and as an athlete, but also as this entrepreneur, and what he wanted to create in the venture space. And he then went to representation. So I think it's important to speak to as many people as you can, but take the initiative to find the experts in the companies, agents, management, whoever's interested. Your best friend next door who wants to create your brand and business, just get clear with what you want to do your research about what's happening in this space, and then put the pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I had talked to some agents early on. I just felt like no one would be able to advocate or tell my story the same way that I could. And I also felt like I'd be able to source expertise in a way where I'll be self-rep, but I wouldn't be alone. Like, even to this day, like, I'm with Castlewitz, so like, if something goes wrong, I feel safe and know that I'd be protected legally. And through it became the best learning experience. I think NIL at heart is just in addition to the total curriculum of what college ought to be. And it puts us on the same level playing field as every other student here. You wonder why professional athletes were going broke at a much higher rate than any other group on campus once they went professional. It was because they were the only group that was banned from practicing any type of professional skills while on campus. We knew how to play our sport, but we didn't know how to pay taxes. We didn't even know how to earn money. Like for a lot of athletes, the first time they're ever paid is that direct deposit on a scholarship stipend check. For me, it was the largest check I'd ever had. I didn't work in high school. My job was school and football. And when you have that mindset, it can get you places, but as soon as in the professional world that stops, if you're not able to create value outside of that for yourself, it has a lot of negative effects, obviously financially, but also on the emotional sense. If you derive all your value from something that's finite, that's why you see so many stories of college athletes having a really tough time after trying to transition into the professional world. So I look at it as an education. NIL was the opportunity to work with brands, the opportunity to even identify what about yourself you take pride in and see yourself more adding value outside of just your sport. And I think with the collective side and now with revenue share coming up with Project D1, athletes are going to be able to capture on some of the value that they create on the field, which I think legitimizes the industry and puts us as an industry in the same way as other leagues that make billions of dollars like the NCAA or other industries that are able to sell these mega contracts to the Foxes, the NBCs, and the CBSs. And I would argue that even if you are rep, like to this day I'm still self-repped, I consult on the representation side, which has taught me, another sort of way of looking at it because I am my own agent now. I work at an agency. But I would say even if you are represented by an agent, which probably most of the top earners are, be involved in every single one of your deals because you'll never have a chance like college to have that sort of educational bubble where you learn how to advocate for yourself and capture on the value that you create.
I'd love to add to that because if you think about it, they're the Division I schools, the star athletes, but there's so much opportunity out there. Libby Dunn, she's a great example, and now she's getting into telling her story and documentary and film and everything. But it's the creator influencer world. It's all about your following. So even if you're not in the most popular sport, of course, football, basketball, soccer now too. UCLA has a bunch of really super soccer players, but volleyball. Olympics is around the corner. Volleyball is coming to Santa Monica. It's the biggest sport for 28 coming. So it's all about storytelling, and you might not be the one brokering the huge $6-figure $1 million deal, but you could get into film. You could get into starting a nonprofit that could help really change a lot of people's lives. So I think there's a very interesting entrepreneurial way to dive in and have impact. And it's not just about getting that one brand deal because brands want more than just writing that check now. They want to know that it's super authentic and how are they going to reach and get the most amount of impact through storytelling.
I'll echo that too because I think what Chase did coming out of school and before, I admired his path before we even really got the chance to meet, was taking deals that maybe didn't have this massive financial compensation really as a way to build this portfolio of brand trust amongst these, small companies which lead to medium-sized companies which lead to Fortune 500 companies. Having that resume really, I think, I wouldn't want to speak for him, but it seemed like it allowed him to project and promote himself up that path in a much faster trajectory. I do a lot of deals with a lot of kids, and I think sometimes I had a girl today, maybe it was a competition, but she turned down a decent sized deal from a reputable company, and I imagine that the dollar amount was the question mark, and it was a 4 or 5 figure deal, and I'm like, why? I'm curious as to why. Maybe she's working with a competitor and it's in a contract, so I'm not going to speculate. But it's just as an example of this is an awesome opportunity for a lot of people. But I think thinking about it in a bigger picture than just the dollars in the door today. This could set you up for the rest of your life if you meet the right partner, and maybe that's your future employer. But I think sometimes it's easy to just look at the right now and not necessarily think about the future and how this is going to impact me for the next, not just 4, but 40 years.
Yeah, everybody brings up a great point here, and I especially resonate with what Michelle said about thinking about building a brand is almost like having an influencer voice. When student athletes are at the university, they're in an incredible spot where they have the university brand that they can build off of, and then they can build their own brand. And a lot of this is about building a community that resonates with the mission that you stand for while you having a platform to do so. So unfortunately at this time, a lot of brands are looking at number of followings to see how they can monetize the deals they do with student athletes. So the sooner the student athletes can realize that, the more they can be empowered to think about how they build their brand meaningfully. And some of that is thinking about how you engage the community as well. One is what you stand behind, but also, are you giving back to the community? Are you engaging them in any way? So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I think the press has been overwhelmingly positive facing NIL. I wonder if we can think about any ways that it could become derailed. I know, Chase, you were very close to signing with Harvard, and I wonder if well-resourced colleges would just be able to buy the absolute best players. And so if there's any sort of sensitivities we could be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the coaches such as Nick Saban who are coming out and saying that NIL is bad or NIL is a doom come from university. Like, I'm a player, but you're a player. You knew in recruitment that some schools were giving out money already, including Alabama. So the fact that certain schools like that are saying, the collective side is bad or things like that, I don't think it's really that these coaches are mad at NIL. They're just mad that it's not an advantage anymore. It becomes something that you have to compete with. And I think that's something that's within the American dream. You look at every single aspect of institutions, organizations, corporations competing for talent. The entities with the best resources that can pay the most, that can provide the best leapfrogs for that person's career, end up getting the most talented people. And that's just how the market works. I think in the realm of college athletics, the NCAA has gotten away with operating as a cartel, as an anomaly, to where they fooled themselves into thinking that this is the structure that is present in every other fabric of America, when really it operates as a complete anomaly. You look at even other leagues like the NFL or the NBA, folks are like, well, what happens when the players are employees? Well, the same thing that happens in other leagues. If you want to cut them, then you better pay the buyout. Same thing that happened at A&M. You want to fire Jimbo Fisher, he's still spending his $73 million. So, there's protections in place for if, colleges and college athletes end up getting the employee status across the board. I think when it comes to the negatives of NIL, every young market has bad actors. And a lot of these collective deals that are going wrong need to be mitigated, both to protect the athletes, but also the school's brand will. There was a case where Rashada, a quarterback, was going to Florida for money that was promised him that ended up not being there. And so he had to go somewhere else. Those are real cases, but they're also a very small fraction of the way most of NIL works. And in the long run, in all free markets, the bad actors are weeded out. Because now, once schools are able to pay athletes directly because of new proposals from the NCAA, that'll weed out all the middlemen donor organizations that are basically creating losses both for the athletes and the donors that they're working with. I think the for-profit collectives that are set up in a way where they do generate actual value for the athletes and the school and those who invest will be empowered going forward.
I'm most excited to see the sort of power struggle and transitions. The NCAA has played a very important role, but I think you're going to see more power through these power conferences. And sort of you've seen what happened here in California with UCLA changing conferences, and I think that the conferences are going to be even more in the forefront of making a lot of influential decisions, especially when a few of these cases in the next less than a year get determined.
Chase hit on revenue share a couple times, and I think it's a great concept. I think it's something that's going to work, but it is something to potentially be wary of if done incorrectly. Where if the schools are truly the facilitators of the money, and it's a revenue share based on money coming into the university, not necessarily based on like television eyeballs or anything like that. We're talking about school revenue. If it's allocated based on the percentages of those revenue, you could, in theory, see some of the non-revenue sports go away, where the money that used to be created by football, basically, and football and basketball predominantly for most schools, propped up a lot of the rest of the the teams and the sports that are at university. Now, I think the solution to that is the television and like eyeball component, where if you're playing a football game and there's 5 million people watching, and there's ad dollars being generated off of that viewership, then sure, have that trickle down effect be a real thing. But doing it from a school standpoint, I think could potentially create some issues. And then we haven't really even talked about a Title IX component, which is another big portion of this.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I think we're going to see collectives working more closely with the universities. I mean, the point of NCAA ruling was to help all sports be revenue generating. So I think we're going to see collectives working alongside universities to help raise money.
Yeah, and just to sort of address some of the concerns as far as a rev share model, I think it's important not to think about this issue from a standpoint of scarcity. All of NCAA is funded in 3 or 4 weeks in March with March Madness. That literally funds all NCAA operations. When we look at how much schools spend on the actual athletes, it's in between 10 and 15% of the revenue. So it's between 10 and 15% is being spent on the athletes currently. It covers everything in the athlete experience. I think new models will look at the media revenue dollars, like what you were saying, and allocate a larger percentage to athletes. That way, room and board can still be covered, scholarship, housing, all of that, in addition to a direct payout. What this will look like is a shift in the percentages. However, for the first time ever, college athletes will actually be stakeholders in the product that they put out there. What you'll do is you'll gain 120, for football, you'll gain 120 new brand ambassadors for your school that have a stake in getting people to every single game, that have a stake in staying later to put a better product out there on the field, because that means Fox pays their conference more. And I think you'll see through the NCAA's actions that it's extremely feasible. If the NCAA thought that Title IX wouldn't be feasible, or thought that other sports wouldn't be able to continue, then they would not release a proposal saying that revenue share along with Title IX protections should be happening. I think the NCAA looks at the numbers and they understand it's possible. I think public sentiment is saying the same thing. The courts are definitely saying it. And there's definitely going to have to be concessions made as college athletes are deemed employees. We've been working for a long time as employees without the protections as such. And when that changes, it's less of an even ethical or what's right or wrong. It's just about what is. If college athletes are operating as employees, and that case goes to the NLRB, they're going to have to continue designating that college athletes are employees. And if you don't want us operating as such, then stop making us operate as such and expecting that from us.
I think also there's still a lot of speculation around how all of this is going to play out. But I could see a real situation where football and maybe basketball spin off from the NCAA and become their own individual entities. And there's been a lot of talk around what that looks like. And I think thinking about Title IX specifically, that seems to, anything I can conceive, that seems to be the main real way that you're going to be able to have this entity that's separate from the NCAA, that's almost governed by a different body. What that is and what that looks like, I don't know. in an election year, I can't imagine trying to figure out how all that's going to get pushed through. But I don't know. I still have a really hard time thinking about how the schools are going to be able to distribute money equally and like make sure everyone is on like the same playing field and happy. And you're right, concessions are going to have to be made, and I don't know who's making that concession. Is it the school? Is it the women's lacrosse team? Like who's making the concession?
But the bottom line is there is no equal playing field. That's the issue. Like if you're at one of the other, maybe not Division I, you're not getting the same resources. You're not getting the same education, understanding what to do and make sure you're protected, taxes, implications, all these things, possibly losing your scholarship. Like there's a lot of issues that that's what concerns me, because here at UCLA, we're at one of the top, performing schools, but what about those that, not everyone's getting an NIL deal, but, that's, HBCU I think is super important as well. What's happening in that landscape. So just making sure everyone has the knowledge and resources, because there is not that standard go-to portal where you can go and you have to dig. I remember when I was doing my capstone and I looked at all Stanford, all the schools in the state of California, and then I went to Illinois and I took a few and contrasted them. I was digging on the sites to try, and all the information was different. I think there has to be some kind of better organization, standardization. I think that's the piece that we're really missing in all of this.
I definitely think the spinoff for football and basketball, if it goes down the road, definitely hurts smaller schools, like in a big way.
Yeah, I would just contend with that by saying the NCAA and media dollars are already not really funding those smaller schools.
No.
When you look at the way a small school is funded, maybe 5 or max 10% of their athletic budget is coming from the NCAA. The majority of it is from student fees. So it'll be with their student council government to decide whether or not their players are compensated. And if they're not able to compensate, then don't require the same out of those players. I think the way we're thinking about this seems so different than other landscapes, because college athletes have historically been expected to do an immense amount of work, spend an immense amount of time, sort of embody an immense amount of literal harm for no pay or for very little compensation or for a spot in the school. And as soon as you get out of that line of thinking, the way the NCAA currently operates almost is ridiculous. In the legal sense, it's why every single case that is sued against the NCAA is currently being cited against them. So I think for smaller schools, it's important to understand that media revenue is already not carrying these schools. What happens at a UCLA, I think, won't have that much effect at a smaller school. And like you said, the disparities are already there. But those disparities are not there because larger schools are finally paying their players. And just because you can't solve everything doesn't mean that we shouldn't solve anything.
That's a great, yeah.
Oh, I just was going to add that universities have been historically set up to essentially be the roadblock in this, so it's going to take a lot to them to kind of have a switch in how they get to compensate the players. I know there's organizations like Altius and different collectives, third-party organizations helping address some of this. So universities will certainly need a lot of support in how they navigate it as the regulations change it.
There's a lot of people on campus that want to practice sports law and be of service to your guys' platform or your talent, individually. So I'd be curious, any questions facing these panelists for people that are interested in getting involved in this field, or interested in how it's playing out here in LA?
I'm not interested in getting involved in this. I just wanted to pick up on a couple things that Jason and other people were saying about the NLRB. Where is the union movement in all of this? I mean, NIL is kind of an individual solution to these problems of being an employee who doesn't get perhaps what they deserve, but there are obviously also collective solutions. And where is the union movement? Is the union movement making it, interacting with athletes and sort of where might that go?
Well, right now, as far as NCAA teams, Dartmouth men's basketball is sort of alone on this. And this week, they're currently voting on that. My newsletter has done a series of polls in partnership with the Generation Lab, and we saw that the majority of college athletes would want to unionize. You know, personally, I think there's a lot of ways you could go about it, but unequivocally, as we achieve employee status, college athletes should have every right to decide whether or not we're a union. And, I think that'll be a whole other sort of development. I honestly think that a unified union between all of college athletics will happen after we start being compensated from the media revenue deals.
When you say unionize, because this was a big point of contention, like at the Northwestern thing, do you mean against the NCAA or against, like, you know, UCLA football versus UCLA? Because I think there's a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of just depends on the model that happens and how we're classified as employees. If it's by team or by sport, that'll be how it happens. If you being an NCAA athlete or you being a college athlete means you're a member of that union, then it'll be a little bit more widespread.
Yeah, that was a big point of contention for the Northwestern Union, because it started out as this like collective bargaining situation where we could, you know, say NCAA, like, you're not giving us the rights to, you know, keep ourselves healthy for now and forever. And then the people who got involved basically morphed it into Northwestern football versus Northwestern. And then we all kind of looked at ourselves and like, this isn't who we're fighting. We were happy with our coaches. We were happy with everything that was going on internally. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Also, based off pay model, I think a lot of the pay will be decided by conference. So I think a union model might work if it was all the Big Ten players to the Big Ten.
Yeah, I can see that. For sure.
I have a question to the gender equity Title IX piece. I'm not real familiar with the lingo. I don't know what a collective is. I'm kind of gleaning that you're going out and upping, and I believe everyone knows that college sports are basically football and basketball, and so I'm just wondering, are there collectives that help women or are really focused on, you know, some more gender equity, and how does that work?
I mean, anytime like I talk to a donor or somebody who's looking to start a collective at UCLA, I tell them to start a collective at one of the women's sports, just because I feel like they'll get a lot better return on investment. If you spend $400,000 or $500,000 on UCLA football collective, you might support 2 players, or you might be able to recruit 1 player. $400,000 or $500,000, as some of these other sports, could guarantee you the top recruiting class in the country every single year. So I look at it sort of from a return on investment way. And I think this is where revenue share sort of aids the universities. And I think the universities and conferences that are a little bit more progressive on this are going to end up winning more, because they understand as soon as you get all the football players on a salary, they're not as worried about the fundraising. They're not as worried about the donors. They're not as worried about, you know, getting their $10,000 or $20,000 from a collective if they're already getting earmarked media revenue dollars. So now that money can go to the Olympic sports. That way we don't get embarrassed in, you know, LA 28. And so, you know, from a return on investment perspective, I think the collectives going forward are going to, have to shift based off NCAA policy towards some of the Olympic sports. And I think what you'll see is more return on investment from those investments.
A lot of the collectives we work with are currently paying, you know, a lot of the female student athletes as well. And we work with LSU, so we work with Livy Dunn. And she's taken it a step further to, like, she has enough brand deals without collective money, so she's foregone any sort of collective deals and actually formed her own collective as a student athlete to raise money for her teammates in other female sports. So there's a lot of interesting creative ways that people are involved in this. Another way is, you know, with the way that the collective raises money, oftentimes is like from a website and a portal. So they have like drop downs to say like, what sport are you trying to support? Are you trying to support, you know, women's basketball and volleyball or football or baseball? You can make that, you know, distinction, and then the funds are then allocated, you know, proportionally. So it's definitely happening. I totally agree. There's not enough money in that space yet, but people like Caitlin Clark and Libby and people doing all these amazing things like and Angel Reese and all of them, like it's fantastic, and I'd love to see it because it's making all of those sports much more visible and, you know, showing them as what they are, which is entertainment.
Yeah, just to add on that, and for those who don't know what collectives are, they're third-party organizations set up specifically to fund the players. They can be for-profit or non-profit, and they can also include all of the players across all sports or focus on specific sports. Collectives traditionally get money from donors and brand sponsors, and each one's set up differently. Collectives could also work with brands to influence them in pulling female athletes and female sports into it. But yeah, it's on a case-by-case basis.
We've got time for one more question.
Hi, Tina, this is more of a technical question. I was just wondering, are the collectives, because Alpha Trend works on blockchain, correct?
Yes.
Are the collectives set up as their own nodes, or do you guys just host the one-time digital collection programs for them?
So the way we work with collectives is they own the entire ecosystem. So we are a white label technology provider that gets collectives set up with a digital storefront on top of their collective's website that can engage fans, students, alumni into micro donations in a fun and engaging way. So the way we've worked with collectives is we would educate them on how this process works. They were able to choose a blockchain of their choice, and then they choose what product they wanted to tokenize and then benefit from. So in the way we worked with collectives is they would pull which athletes they wanted to help with. They used athlete images and used brand logos, and then they launched that on the blockchain. And through that model, they were able to engage the fan base, but also create a direct relationship with the fans where they could continue and bring other brands, brand deals in and engage the same fan base.
Thank you.
Thanks for everyone coming today.